All right, welcome everyone, and a really special welcome to all you GCSE students tuning in for this explainer. If you're prepping for your exams right now, you are in exactly the right place. Today we're focusing on Component 1, Good and Evil. Specifically, we're digging into the very foundation of Christian ethics. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to explore how and really why Jesus is viewed as the ultimate source of moral authority for Christians. We aren't just looking at what he said, we're looking at how he completely flipped the script on how we are supposed to treat each other. So here is our roadmap for today's revision notes. First, moral authority. Second, the Sermon on the Mount. Third, updating the law. Fourth, the Golden Rule. Fifth, mercy to outcasts. And finally, number 6, modern application.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Source of Moral Authority.
When Christians have to make really tough ethical decisions about good and evil, where exactly do they look for guidance? Well, they look right here. Matthew chapters 5 through 7. Seriously, if I were sitting next to you right now as your tutor, I would tell you to write this down, highlight it, and literally burn this reference into your memory for the exam. When you need to cite a source of Christian moral authority, Matthew 5 to 7 is your absolute gold standard. The section of the gospel contains the most concentrated, dense collection of Jesus' ethical teachings. Moving right along to Section 2, the Sermon on the Mount. So that collection of teachings found in Matthew 5 to 7 actually has a very famous name, the Sermon on the Mount. And you guys, this wasn't just some casual, everyday conversation. This was Jesus laying out an incredibly clear, totally radical set of teachings on exactly how people should live their lives. It all begins with what are known as the Beatitudes. Basically, these are a list of blessings and rewards given to very specific types of people. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates just how radical Jesus' message really was. Notice exactly who he blesses here: the poor, the grieving, those who suffer, and the peacemakers. I mean, these are definitely not the traits we usually associate with being blessed, right? The world usually values wealth, power, and success. But Jesus, he establishes entirely new categories of behavior as the ultimate models for human living. He's basically saying that those who are closest to God are often the exact same people who the world completely devalues or even actively persecutes. It is a complete 180-degree inversion of societal values. Which brings us to Section 3, updating the old law. Now, you have to remember, Jesus wasn't starting entirely from scratch here. He was speaking to a Jewish audience who already knew the Torah, the Old Testament law, really, really well. But he didn't just stand there and repeat those old laws. He actually updated them to be significantly more demanding. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark visual contrast you see between the two sides. Jesus repeatedly uses this really specific phrasing: "You have heard it said, but I say to you." On the left side, we have the old law from the Torah: do not murder, right? That's a very clear external boundary. But on the right side, Jesus updates it. He says you must not even get angry. He takes an external rule about physical violence and just transforms it into an internal standard about your deepest thoughts and emotions. Suddenly, the law becomes vastly more demanding. It's no longer just about what you actually do. It's about what's going on in your heart. And he takes this whole focus on internal motives even further. Jesus explicitly warns people about doing the right actions, but for totally the wrong reasons. Take praying, fasting, and giving to charity. Objectively, these are all really good actions. But if your reason for doing them is just to get praise from other people, just to feed your own ego, Jesus says that is absolutely the wrong reason. The right reason, in fact, the only reason, is simply because it's the right thing to do. Your ethical life shouldn't just be a performance for an audience. Let's look at Section 4, the Golden Rule. So with all these incredibly demanding internal standards, how is anyone supposed to keep track of it all? Well, this brings us to the central synthesizing rule that guides basically all Christian ethical decisions. This is the Golden Rule. It is the absolute ultimate summary of Jesus' moral authority. Notice that it's a dual command. First, you must love God above all else. Second, you must love your neighbor, and crucially, your enemy, just as you love yourself. It's that addition of the enemy that makes this so insanely challenging. This rule right here is the ultimate measuring stick for any action. If a Christian is ever unsure of what the right or wrong thing to do is in a modern dilemma, this is the exact rule they return to. All right, Section 5, showing mercy to outcasts. Up to this point, we've kind of just been looking at the theory of Jesus' moral authority, his words, his rules. But moral authority isn't just about what you say, right? It's about what you actually do. So let's transition into the practice of his teachings by looking at exactly how he interacted with the outcasts of his society. In the gospel stories, Jesus spent a massive amount of time with sinners, the sick, and those who were completely cast out from society. Let's just trace this progression step by step. Step 1. He intentionally eats and spends time with tax collectors, adulterers, and sex workers, literally the people the religious elite completely refused to associate with. Step 2. His mercy extends to his very last breath as he's crucified right alongside criminals. Step 3. He willingly touches and heals the sick, including lepers who were physically exiled from the community because of their disease. And step 4, he heals those considered possessed by evil spirits. And actually, it's really important to note for your modern understanding that many people today believe that what was described as demonic possession back at the time of Jesus would actually be understood and described today as mental illness. I really want to highlight this specific, powerful takeaway for you. There is no outcast or sickness that Jesus refuses to deal with. His actions perfectly, 100%, match his teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. By eating with sinners and touching lepers, he's showing that absolutely no one is outside of God's mercy. He is proving, with his actions, that God will always forgive those who sin.
And finally, Section 6, Christian Application Today.
This brings us to our final and, honestly, arguably the most important section for those of you writing essays. How exactly does a modern believer take these ancient texts from Matthew 5 to 7 and actually apply them to the world today? So the crucial point is this: modern Christians are called to actively mirror the actions of Jesus. Based on his moral authority, Christians must show forgiveness to everyone, exactly as God does. They learn that they must never treat anyone as an outcast, regardless of their background, their sins, or their illnesses. Instead of judging, a Christian's true duty is to be present with people in their suffering and to actively help them if it's possible. It's all about taking that radical inclusion Jesus demonstrated back then and practicing it in our communities right now. Which leaves us with this final, really profound question to consider. We saw earlier that the rules Jesus set out in the Sermon on the Mount, like never even getting angry, are demanding to the point of being nearly impossible to perfectly follow. So, why set the bar so high? Well, perhaps the real goal is simply to strip away our pride. Think about it. If the rules are literally impossible, no one can claim they have a perfect ego. No one can say they've achieved all the goodness needed entirely on their own. It forces us to recognize our own flaws, which completely destroys our pride, and makes us realize just how deeply we need God's grace and forgiveness. And honestly, that is exactly why Jesus spent his time with sinners, because they were the ones who already knew they needed that forgiveness. Think about how that transforms the way we view morality entirely. Keep that thought in your mind as you continue your revision. Good luck with your studies, everyone, and keep looking for the deeper meaning behind the text.